Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the John Mayer Gear Lounge Show. Tonight, we are joined with Ryan, Ahmad, and Gabe, and I am Justin. Thank you guys all so much for coming on today to talk about
Hell yeah.
Silver Sky.
Hell yeah. Strat with the PRS headstock.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get it. Hopefully, we don't get into too much controversy because I feel like that's been beaten to death already. But we got to touch on it a little bit, for sure.
Yeah.
So hopefully you guys are all enjoying the start of season 2, and we thought season 2 would be obviously best to start off with Super Eagle, the Mayer Sig Fender, which released last week in 2 parts, and now the Silver Sky, Sean's new main instrument. So without further ado, you guys, should we just get right into it?
Let's do it.
So let's get right on into it. Silver Sky. Thought we'd start off today with a quick timeline here. As you can see, 2014, JM and Fender split off, and there was a period of research and development. We don't know exactly when, but the Super Eagle and JMod were born, as well as the Silver Sky, which released kind of was revealed in 2017. We move on to 2018 in March, and there was the public launch of the first 4 colors. Less than a year later, 2019 Winter NAMM, we get 4 more colors. Then in the fall of 2019, they announced that Horizon and Onyx was going to be discontinued. And of course, last year, Winter NAMM, we get Maple Necks and 3 new colors, 1 limited edition. And then, as just happened, Winter NAMM 2021 online due to COVID, we get the Lunar and something that wasn't very much talked about, the Mock Sand in Satin, as well as the Gloss Mock Sand being discontinued. As you guys can see, the arrow pointing towards that, because we don't really know when it's being discontinued. Some dealers still have it where you can order it, some don't, but it's safe to say sometime coming up the gloss is going to be discontinued.
By a dealer that they're going to trickle out just from what they had in the factory, but they're not making any new ones. That's what I was told.
As of right now.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's kind of interesting. So if you guys want a gloss Mock Sand, now's the time to go and grab one.
And the cool thing with the Lunar Ice, there's a channel on YouTube called Trog's Guitar Show, and he just got one. He's a big review person, and he'll sell them on his Reverb page afterwards. But he got a Lunar Ice, and he opens the body, opens the cavities, sees everything. And his, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was made in November 2020 as a body date. So it looks like some of them may have been built before the new year, and the builders had to sign an NDA saying you can't talk about this or anything because it comes out in January. It's kind of cool.
Seems like, yeah. So
makes you think, how long was Nebula? Yeah, how long was Nebula before the release? How long was it already born or done before going to the public?
Yeah, that was really interesting. So I guess moving on, here is the now infamous tweet that John later actually deleted. Heads up to anyone thinking about owning my signature Fender Strat. They're no longer being made, and I'm no longer a Fender artist. That was a pretty crazy thing to see on Twitter.
I was heading back to school. I think I came home for one weekend to see my parents, and I was in Dulles Airport in Virginia, going back to Boston to Berkeley, and I see this on my phone on Twitter. Oh my God, he's leaving Fender. And a couple of years later, I sell my Fender JM Strat, but that's a different story.
There's some theories as to why he left Fender, and it was kind of circulating for a while until there are a couple of podcasts that he's talked about it. There was one actually, oddly enough, with Jeff Ross. I don't know if you guys have seen it. If you haven't, check it out. It's pretty good. He had a really good relationship with Mike Eldred, or Eldred, however you say it. And he seems like a really cool guy. They would always partner up on projects. The Reverse Proto was one. And they would collaborate and make these guitars, and he had a really open relationship with them where he could come drop by, get these prototypes. And I thought it was a really fun relationship as a consumer, but they changed their corporate structure. It became different. They ended up canning Mike Eldred. So when he left, I think that was a lot of the relationship that he had with Fender was Mike Eldred. A lot of people thought it was John Cruz, and I don't think that's the case. And if you watch videos of him, he seems kind of like a, you know, I'll reserve comments. You can make your own judgments there.
He's a character.
Yeah, Eldred was a G, and it got to a point where, you know, he's the signature artist making a ton of money for the company, and I'm assuming if he wants something sent and they're not sending it, probably gets annoying. And I know that's what he gets from Paul Reed Smith, and that's a dumb move on Fender's part. I mean, I would be, you know, that's your golden goose. And you know, and then there were rumors about, oh, you've got to play our amps. We don't care if you put the two rocks and the dumbbells back. We want you to, and you don't do that to an artist like him, and he's not willing to sacrifice his integrity either. So outside of running the JMod into a 1x12 when it looks like it's a 2x12, but I'll leave that alone. Hey, it's still front and center though, so
Still being used at least, but
yeah.
And it's interesting if you watch the last episode with talking about his signature guitar, he didn't use it a lot anyways. It wasn't his go-to. It wasn't always the first grab and go one for him.
And it's much better. The Silver Sky, in my opinion, blows away the JM Sig. It's just not even, Not that the JM Sig's bad, but I think the Silver Sky is a far better instrument.
Yeah, and the Silver Sky has a much more comfortable neck, in my opinion, compared to the JM Sig.
Right.
And the Big Dippers were just nothing crazy pickup-wise.
A little bit over,
in my opinion. Yeah, I think people are so enamored with like this pickup sound, and I need the Big Dippers. Well, you don't really need Big Dippers. Remember, it's a whole system, the guitar and everything. So just you can scoop some amp or put the amp louder, scoop the mids, and roll some high end off. If you use a longer cable, that takes some high end off as well. So you could get that tone without the Big Dipper pickups pretty convincingly, probably. But like we all know, anything with John's name on it, it'll sell.
Sounds like hotcakes.
Yeah.
And that's why Fender messed up. Like, you blew it. You blew it. So first I thought we should talk about is this guitar that John started playing a lot, specifically in 2013, 2014, the 64 vintage Strat. This guitar kind of became his number one, as we know, especially when the Black One's neck started to twist. And he's had this guitar since Continuum. He recorded Slow Dancing on it. We know that for a fact. And back in this era, right around the time he actually split from Fender is when you get to see it a lot. And we know that the Silver Sky is based on this guitar.
Yeah.
Yep. 63.5, because that guitar has elements of a 63. You look at the logo, and then a 64, so it's kind of a mashup. And I don't think they hid that at all. It was pretty obvious.
Yeah.
No, John, as we'll see, John came out and he flat out said he wanted to make the Silver Sky an accessible version of his 64. Just a modern take on it.
I'll say that guitar, I mean, if you look at the recordings from that Born and Raised period, that guitar sounds great. Sounds really, really good, that guitar. Even with the clone of the TS on top of it, just into the two rocks itself, it's a great, it just sounds great guitar. I bet it plays great and everything, but like Ahmad said, there was no hiding that the Silver Sky was a more accessible type of guitar in comparison to this.
And John's even said, he's saying if you get one shot at a vintage Strat, a 64 is your best bet. That was kind of the prime year. You have the best odds of getting a really good guitar. And those pickups do sound really vintagey. And then pickups that are on a vintage guitar, there's this processor, it's called, I think, degaussing, when a magnet loses strength over time and they age, and they actually they don't get muddy. They're really clear, but they lose that harsh high end on the treble, and they have a lot of articulation and they have a lot of bass. And, you know, when I've seen him play it live, I mean, he hits that low E and it just thumps, you know. It's got a great sound. It's got to be one of the best sounding Strats I've heard. And I played a real 64, one of the best guitars I've ever played. And it had that kind of, you know, that punch, that tone to it. So I could see why he likes that guitar a lot.
Ryan, you were gonna say something too earlier.
I was gonna mention the neck profile, saying that a lot of this early '60s Strats that I played have ranging neck profiles. Some are thinner than others, but I would say the Silver Sky is definitely, if it's modeled after this guitar, it's definitely got a nice girth for it, or girth on it, for lack of a better word. It's not too big. I've played some necks that are too big. I don't have alien thumbs that are super long, but it's a great neck, and it plays a lot like some of the vintage Strats that I've held in my hands.
Yes.
Now, as we're transitioning onto the Silver Sky, Boston, 2017. John
I was at that show.
unveils this monster. Gabe, I'm so jealous you were at the reveal show for the Silver Sky.
Yeah,
John,
like. Oh, go ahead, Justin. You do your part.
No, I was gonna say, John walks on stage and everyone goes, "What the heck is that?"
Yeah. So that was maybe a couple shows into that tour. He didn't play beforehand, and then I come in, and I got there pretty early so I could see Renee going on and off stage, making sure everything was ready. And he brought Tungsten Silver Sky out, and like, oh, whoa, like that a Strat? Where I was from, you couldn't see the headstock. You just see a silver S type body. And then he comes out. I think the first one was Queen California, and then he picked up for the solo because this was on the stand, and then you get a real close-up of the birds and the headstock, and you realize, oh, the PRS headstock is reversed, I think. Yeah, reversed. And then at this point, you're like, what is this thing? Is this a Strat or is this a PRS neck on a Strat? And that's all that really we could talk about until final product release. But he played it across that whole tour. He took it to Europe. And it sounded really cool. Just a modern Strat, I'm assuming, if you could say that before knowing anything. And at that point, I guess him and Paul's relationship was pretty well known, and they would talk all the time and very good friends and everything. But who would have thought that this would happen, and then this get more hate or more negative comments, as opposed to other brands who make this exact same guitar basically but with different headstocks.
Oh yeah, you talk about Sir doing their thing.
Very similar designs to the main, very similar designs to the original guitar they're trying to copy, but all that's different is the headstock. So why does this guitar get so much more hate when there are other companies been doing this for much longer
and don't try and innovate as much?
Yeah,
exactly.
Because you may say that maybe they're just different woods, and everything, but I think the Silver Sky, in my opinion, I think is one of the best modern Strat type guitars.
Without a question.
Yeah, and it sounded great, and I'm sure the next slide will show more, and then we'll get to the release. And a year later.
Yeah.
What a reveal. What a teaser this is, with all the feedback and everything else, the saying, any publicity is good publicity. Like we saw the feedback, we saw the comments. I was on some YouTube videos today doing some research, and even then I saw some of the old comments. I was like, man, people are really giving it to him. They're really roasting him for this. But yeah, let's continue. Let's go on.
Even on like when the Lunar Ice released, everyone was like, "Oh, that's a nice looking Strat." And it's like, really? But we'll get there. I
Debut.
remember, yeah, I remember being at the Edmonton show, which I believe was on the 17th of April, and same thing. John walked out and he played this guitar for 99, like pretty much every electric song he played this on, except for I believe he used the 64 on Helpless, and the black one came out for Gravity, and that was, but the rest was on the Silver Sky. And actually, no, it's a lie. The trio stuff, he brought out that I think it was 65 hardtail that he used on Where the Light Is. That came out.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That's a tangent, but anyways, that was cool. So, that guitar too. Or sorry, yeah, you know the one I'm talking about, the burst hardtail that he used during Where the Light Is for the trio, that came out. But anyways, I remember seeing this and yeah, thinking instantly I knew that it was going to be a new model, and just being like, people are gonna lose their you know what over this guitar. There's gonna be a lot of upset people. So moving on, very beginning of March, we got a little bit of promotional tease from John and PRS. He posted this picture of him holding his Silver Sky, only with the words tomorrow at PRS. And you got this Reach for the Sky kind of promotional thing that PRS did with a Frost Silver Sky,
Yeah.
which is really weird that they used Frost and not Tungsten for the Silver Sky promo.
This looks cleaner. White background design.
Yeah, could be just.
This looks nice.
Maybe wanting to sell some white ones with John only ever using the Tungsten at that point.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, just there. You already seen this one if you're on the tour. You've seen the Tungsten one, but you haven't seen the other colors.
It was a cool way to tease a new color
colors.
too.
Yeah.
Ryan, you love that, working at Shout Out Tesla.
Yeah.
It makes sense. It makes sense. What an introduction to the new age. And I think there was this conversation. I don't know if we're going to get too into colors. I might hold that, but regarding like a Sunburst and why Sunburst hasn't colors, but we can get more into that later.
And then that will bring us on to March 5th, 2018.
Reveal.
The reveal happens. We get 4 colors. We get Horizon, Tungsten, Frost, and Onyx. And everyone, as we said before, the internet blows up. I don't think there's ever been a more controversial guitar released ever. Because like we said, people are still upset about it. It's been almost 3 years, and people are still upset about it. But it was crazy. What did you guys think when they officially announced the guitar?
I had no interest in it at all. I'm a huge Mayer fan, and I'm like, okay, it looks like a Johnson electric guitar. At first, I thought it was ugly. And I'd seen him in 2017. I saw him April, was it 15th or 17th, one of those days. And he busted out that Tungsten. And I was just thinking, like, what the heck is that, you know? And then I'm thinking, well, I don't really care that much because I wasn't impressed with his 2017 tour tone. So that was my initial thought.
I go next. I was walking across the street, Boylston and Tremont Street, going to my apartment, and I see the news. Oh my God, new Silver Sky. And also so that was the guitar that was being played. Now we know what the name is. I think like a mod, I was like, it's cool. Doesn't really get me that excited because it's just another modern Strat type guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't play one until like 3 months later at the PRS artist place in Burbank here. And then I was like, wow, this is a cool guitar, plays nice.
Shit.
And then,
Sorry, 1 second, Gabe. Sorry, can you repeat that? I'm just...
yeah, so I'll go back. So I didn't play this guitar until 2 or 3 months later when I moved to LA at the PRS artist place here in Burbank. And that's when I thought, well, it's a cool guitar. It plays great. And that was through a J-Mod also at the studio. And that was the only guitar, we'll talk later about that, I feel comfortable telling people, if you find a cool one, you can play at a store. If they don't have your color, order it, and I'm sure it'll play the exact same. And it's cool to know that that was John's intention, that you can go anywhere, get a Silver Sky, and it could be gig ready, as they say.
What about you, Ryan?
I remember the posts, and I'm very much like a behind the scenes when these kinds of things happen, and just kind of like, oh, I'm gonna keep my thoughts to myself. I haven't played it, I haven't heard it, I haven't really done much with it. I wasn't as into John Mayer as I am now, and I remember just reading the comments and just kind of absorbing that and thinking, oh my gosh, like these people are pretty relentless. I thought the colors were interesting. I thought the name was kind of a nod towards obviously the S Strat type guitar, Stratocaster, you know, atmospheric, something like that, you know, above us, above the world or something like that. So Silver Sky was like, okay, that's interesting. Interesting that they chose a color, and it's silver, and they have a guitar that's not silver called the Silver Sky. I thought, no, we'll see how it goes. You know, I'm sure they picked it for a reason, but I didn't play one until it was the color of yours, Gabby. Is it the, what's the
Golden
correct
Mesa.
term for the color? Golden Mesa. Yeah. I always call it like Aztec Gold because I'm, you know, born and bred on the OG stuff. But yeah, and I was playing that Miss Sam Ash, and I was like, wow, this guitar is really unforgiving. I remember thinking like the pickups are just like, boom, they're there, which we'll talk about. So I'm gonna get into it. But yeah, I remember playing it for the first time and thinking, all right, this is awesome. I like it.
Yeah, I was very much the same way. I think probably it sounds like I was the most excited out of the three of us, just because I'd seen that guitar on tour and I'd been dying to know more about it. And until the public reveal, we'd only ever seen the silver one. That was it. There had been no other talk about it, like speculation online, and I was kind of thinking along the lines of, okay, so they did a like 10 grand J mod, an $11,000 Super Eagle. What is this thing gonna cost? That was more my biggest like, oh really, like I'm gonna have to shell it, because I was wanting to get one. I'm like, I'm gonna have to shell out a lot of money to get one. And then they announced that it's cheaper than a custom shop Strat. And I think that's what made me really excited, was that John was once again, like with his Mayer Sig, was putting his name on something that was a bit more affordable and clearly a more, like, it's going to be a main production model guitar. Again, the name Silver Sky, I like it now. At the time, I did not like it too, because, okay, we got a red Silver Sky, you got a white Silver Sky. It doesn't really, I almost thought to myself, if I ever buy one, it's got to be silver, because or else it's just kind of dumb. But I've warmed up to the name now, but it was an odd choice to put a color in the name, for sure.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask him that. Why did you pick this name?
Yeah,
Maybe Ahmad will know.
Yeah, Ahmad, next time you meet him, you got to ask him. But I wanted to touch on,
because we on record and address that. He's talked about the name Silver Sky.
Has he? I don't remember.
Yeah, and I think there was also something too about him basically saying he didn't really want his name all over it. It's just on the neck plate. He wants it to become its own thing eventually too. So I can't remember what the exact reason was, but I mean, you could probably add that in later.
Yeah, I remember him saying he wanted it to be like the name of a model. He doesn't want it just to be a John Mayer signature. He wants a lot of people to play it and for it to be like a new thing that is now. Which, sorry, Gabe, go ahead.
I would say very much like Les Paul's. Les Paul was, I guess you can say, it's still the longest signature guitar being made, but it's also a Les Paul model that tons of people have played, not just jazz, rock, blues, metal, and there are also many variations of Les Pauls. So I think it's sort of like that. So maybe in the future, the Silver Sky, but associated with John Mayer, but you can play whatever you want on it and not be locked down and say you're playing a John Mayer signature guitar with the huge low with his huge signature right here, or like no, the
That's
signature's right
interesting.
there, and I can do whatever I want.
I think that it ties in that he's keeping the same, what's the word I'm looking for? He's sticking to his guns with his Mayer signature strats. He put his headstock, or sorry, he put his signature on the back of the headstock. And again, he was kind of, I want this to be able to be someone's guitar. It's got my name on the back, so you can put yours all over the rest of it. He did the same thing with the Silver Sky. Didn't even really call it. They could have called it the, like Les Paul. They could have called it the Mayer something, right?
Mayer
Like,
Sky.
yeah.
That's so interesting. It's like Les Paul, and you think, oh, there's a Jimmy Page signature Les Paul. There's a Billy Gibbons signature Les Paul. So it's a
Yeah.
Billy Gibbons signature Les Paul model guitar. It's interesting.
And the Les Paul is the signature model for Les Paul.
Right.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
Yeah. So I think, you never know. You might see he's close with like Ed Sheeran and a few people. Maybe they'll come out with a purple, different pickup Ed Sheeran, Silver Sky. Well, we'll talk about the purple one. Don't worry. But I wanted to talk about how we discuss a lot of the controversy. And it's kind of not rare, but it's really nice when you hear other artists who love their Silver Sky and talk about it. Maybe none other than Brad Whitford from Aerosmith. When I first saw that he plays a Silver Sky live with one of the greatest rock and roll bands ever, I was really blown away. And this is from the guitar.com interview, and he says, that's the one that I sit around and play more than any other. I love the way it feels. To me, PRS and Mayer have taken the Stratocaster, but they haven't just stuck a different headstock on it. They've come in with all these modern views about how to use the idea of this instrument and involve the body, the neck, and that sort of thing. I play it every night. I could literally play the whole show with it if I wanted to, but I've got all these other pretty guitars that I like to show off. That was huge for me, at least, to hear. Like one of the main guitar, like one of the two guitars from Aerosmith is coming out and saying, I love the Silver Sky and I could play the whole show on it. That I think might have shut a few haters up about this guitar. Someone from that kind of side of music, for sure.
Don't you think that's why he also chose Silver Sky? I think that proves the point, right? Because if it was, hey, I'm playing a John Mayer guitar, that might be weird for a rock star with an ego. No, I'm playing a Silver Sky.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
explain the best color as well.
Yeah.
Can't tell.
It looks so good on
That's
stage.
Moxan, right?
Yep.
Moxan.
And if you think about it, they don't have a private stock PRS like for the Silver Sky. So he's playing a production model.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. That if a guy on stage with, the likes of Steven Tyler and Joe Perry, he's playing to an arena full of people, a stadium, and he's sounding great on the production, and that just shows how much guitar you got for their price point.
You go to Guitar Center after the show and buy one yourself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If they don't have your
Play
color
one.
you like, order from Sweetwater, and you'll get the one that you want.
I'll throw in some candy too.
Yeah.
I wanted to show, kind of like we did in the Mayer Sig episode, a couple artists who are also known for playing around on the Silver Sky. You got Clay Cook from Zach Brown Band. He's known to use one quite often, actually. You have Danish Pete, of course, I had to throw him in there. And Ariel Posen, he has a Moxan as well, and he was sent that early before the Moxan actually released from John, which is pretty cool. Do you guys know of anyone else who plays a Silver Sky live? Those were the four main ones that I could think of up the top of my head.
Well, for when when Tomo got his from John, he took it a lot to Berkeley. That's for sure. It was between that and his kanji guitar from his builder in Japan. That's all I can think of who plays it regularly.
Yeah,
I didn't
I know
also
some
Clay
Instagram
Cook
people.
change the pick guard, or am I going crazy? Like Clay
I
Cook
think
maybe changed the pick guard at one point.
maybe. To me, at least in that picture, I think it's the lighting. But maybe he
Yeah,
changed it
well,
to a minty one almost.
yeah.
They
There
age
was a
fast to the sun. They get like, this is the fastest aging pickguard I've ever seen in my life. It's true. I'm just,
No, it is for sure. You leave it near the sun and it's gonna yellow right away. But I think, yeah, off the top of my head, those were the four kind of main people. Like Ryan was saying there, you got a lot of Instagram people who play one, like Tyler from Music Is Win. He uses one. Sometimes he's a big PRS guy, obviously.
Zach Rosenblum is playing one.
Yeah. So you get a lot of like those guys who are using it, but it's kind of cool to see on the stage with Zach Brown Band and on the stage with Aerosmith, you have a Silver Sky. That's pretty cool. And two, again, kind of, you got almost like a country rock, and then you got, classic rock and roll being used, and then the Silver Sky also doing the Mayor thing, the bluesy stuff and pop. So it's a very versatile guitar. Now, let's talk about specs, you guys. So obviously Silver Sky is made with an alder body. You can currently now get rosewood or a maple.
Yep.
It's got a 7.25-inch radius, which a lot of people didn't like at all.
That was weird. Yeah, that was oh, you can't bend. Well, too bad. So sad. Well, get used to it.
it's a proven fact you cannot bend on a 7.25. Jimi Hendrix couldn't do it. Stevie couldn't do it. John can't do it. I'm just throwing it out there.
I know that was stupid. People being like, "Oh, it's a 7.25-inch radius. I can't do it." It might not be comfortable for you if you're not used to it, but
well, I mean, you can still do like. It goes down a little bit, but nothing crazy. Well, that's out of tune.
If you think about it,
but yeah,
you've got a radius that's curved. To pitch, you don't have to physically bend the string as much. On a flatter radius board, you're going to have to move the string more. So people forget that. If you're doing a heavy bend on a 7.25, you don't have to actually move the string as much. That's my experience. I don't know if you guys would agree.
Oh, I was saying
Okay.
it's all about technique at that point. At first, it may feel weird for people with that. I mean, also, if you have multiple guitars with different neck shapes, of course, it's going to be a change of scenery, obviously. Because also maybe depends where you place your thumb on the back of the neck. Do you place it right there or on the shoulder, and how much strength you need to bend and that kind of stuff. But if you're not used to it, it could take a little time to get used to it. But once you're used to it, it's like you can pick it up and it's muscle memory at that point. The more you play it, so you'll know where everything is tension-wise.
I can't.
Also,
really
your setup and springs and everything.
Like 7.25, 9.5. I'll go back and forth. It's not really that different to me. But maybe that's just me.
I was going to say, I've never picked up a guitar and said, "Oh, get this way for me. This radius just won't do.
Yeah,
This is
neither
the
have
worst
I.
guitar." It's like you play it,
Yeah.
people have done so much more with it. Like you said, Hendrix, SRV, like they've made it work. And like, I think some complaints that I've read is like, oh, it frets out. Oh, but Gabby just played and he did like more than a whole step, way more than a whole step, and it was just fine.
Oh, my
and that's what John
Yeah.
said too. John came out and he said, the thing about the 7.25-inch radius is that, okay, you hand me a guitar and you ask me what the radius is. I might say it's a 12 and it's actually 9.5. Or I might say it's a 9.5 and it's a 7.25. He flat out came out and said he doesn't know what the radius is until he's told. So if it's set up properly and it plays good, who cares? And if he can't tell, and he does this for a living on how many hours there goes my camera a little bit, how many hours he's played on stage, and if he still can't tell the difference between a radius on a different guitar, there's no way mortals like us can tell. I call BS on anyone who says they can tell. If he can't,
I have no idea what my Gibson radiuses are, honestly. So,
I was going to ask.
Or the Silver Super Eagle. I think it's like pattern something neck carve. I don't know, but it's a very harsh quote, which I don't know. The gear doesn't suck. You do. A very harsh quote, but yeah, don't care about specs Yeah, just play the guitar. If you don't like it, you don't like it.
Exactly.
Put the brochure down, get in the Ferrari, and drive it. You don't need to read it. Yeah. You just got to try it.
Anyways, moving on. So the Silver Sky has what PRS call custom size frets. I read a forum chain where someone actually emailed and hounded PRS to get an idea for the size, because all that they would really say is that they're custom size frets. If you go on PRS right now and look at the Silver Sky page, it doesn't tell you. PRS replied to this guy saying they're similar to Dunlop 6230. So I'm going to say they're PRS's version of 6230 frets.
6230.
like if they're saying they're similar to it, okay, so that means if I need a refret, go with those ones pretty much, or order them from you. Bolt-on neck joint, we know it's part of their bolt-on range. I mean, some people don't like bolt-ons, but I mean, you play vintage Strat, I guess you get the 3, but it's a bolt-on and it sounds great. Like, who cares? No one can tell unless you look down and flip it over and you're like, oh, it's bolt-on. Like, okay.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. The nut width, 1.656. Again, I don't think like the nut width is anything crazy.
No idea what that means. I mean, I know what that means, but it's not a. The guitar's in tune, you can play it. That's good enough.
Exactly. Some people, again, I think people just like to pick apart something because they can. They'll be like, "Oh, I don't like the nut, that 1.656 nut width it's too much this. I don't like that. I prefer my nut width to be." It's like, okay, come on. Scale length.
Again,
yeah, once again.
Put down the brochure.
Go and drive it. 25.5-inch scale length. Double action truss rod from PRS. Now, the pickups, the 635 JM pickups. Ahmad, I know you wanted to touch on the pickups, so I'll let you start this part off.
So this is like the main selling point to the Silver Sky is that sound, because they said, okay, we're going to go for that 63, 64 Fender vintage sound. I've seen pictures of them. They're not enamel wire. They're form bar wire. So it leads me to believe if that's what the theory is, that's what's in his guitar. So they have these pickups. They've got a custom stagger that matches the radius of the board. What was interesting is that I've seen Paul Reed Smith talking about developing the pickups with John, and he had a prototype that he gave John, and John was playing it, and it didn't have as much bottom end. He played that guitar, that prototype, and then he plugged in his 64 or 63, 5. He plugged it in, and then Paul Reed Smith said it had 3 decibels more output and 6 decibels more bottom. And then John said something to the effect of, I can make it work, but I kind of don't want to. So Paul Reed Smith couldn't, he took the 64 and John needed it back for a show. He had one day with it, and he talks about how he put it in the back of his Prius and was hoping he didn't get rear-ended. And he went home and he was dissecting and just trying to figure it out. And I think he unwired it, and he was just racking his brain, and it had stumped him. So then he calls one of his buddies, who is an engineer slash pickup winder that knows, you know, what this is. And there's some secret sauce apparently that he figured out through talking to him that is proprietary, and that's how we land on these pickups. I'm interested to know who it was that he talked to. Was it Ron Ellis? I don't know. There's theories out there on who he talked to. And I will say the pickups, they have the character. I played that real 64 when I was in LA, and it's just so punchy and immediate. And it really has that character. The Silver Sky is a really punchy guitar. It hits you. It's got plenty of bottom. And that whole saying, the bass has treble and the treble has bass, is true. But to me, there's a bit of a perfectness to the tone of the pickups versus maybe a traditional Fender. So it's got that 60s vibe. They're not super low output. They're pretty powerful, but they sound good. I'm sure you guys want to add some stuff to that, but that's what I got on the pickups.
The classic, what was it, Ahmad? The lows have highs and the highs have lows. Yeah. I mean, I think it sounds great through a clean platform. You'll really hear the sounds of the pickups and the guitar. And I think guitars like these really shine with like mild to semi-distorted or semi-overdrive tone, because I mean, you want the guitar to sound like itself, which is the pickups come in handy. So if you have the same pickups in the Silver Skies and there's other ones, and hopefully the consistency is through all this Silver Skies. But yeah, they sound great. The middle pickup is one of my favorite pickups, as well as the middle and bridge setting. And you still can get you can still get that tone. I mean, plug in this to a Fender amp and reverb and you're there. So I think they knocked out of the park.
Yeah, to that point, can we agree that it takes out those ice picky, you know, harsh frequencies at the top end, and it's out of the box, probably the closest to plugging in to try to get his tone?
The Big Dippers had some ice pick in the top end.
Yep,
They do.
In my opinion.
On mine, I roll my tone. I run with it anywhere between 5 and 8, because again, it has some of that harshness. Like they did a good job in reducing it on the Mayor Fender Strat, but it still has those dippers have some of that quality, and that the Silver Sky doesn't. It's amazing.
To your point, Dustin, I have my tone on like 8 on both tone on here, just to take just a little bit of the high end out, because I have a lot of treble on the Hard Deluxe. But yeah, they're much more balanced. And if you know what you're doing, you can sound just like them, or get the sound at least.
Yeah.
No.
Tone is in the fingers. If we're good on pickups, Ryan, did you have anything to add on pickups?
Nothing crazy. I mean, you guys pretty much hit the nail on the head. I will say I'm from a normal person's standpoint that isn't as obsessive about these kinds of things. I can just say the pickups are kind of unforgiving. They will make you sound good if you know what you're doing, and if you don't, I'm a firm believer that you'll be able to hear it. They're pretty in your face, and I think they sound amazing. I just think, you know, like especially through a clean platform, and like Gabby said, a little overdriven, it really has a fantastic fullness to the tone, and all the positions are usable, and with the tone controls, they're all just, you can do so much with it.
No, I agree. They're great pickups, and like we kind of say, 63.5, that kind of again points towards you have some characteristics of a 64 and a 65 is kind of where they're getting at with naming them. The Silver Sky also has the PRS vintage locking tuners, which are the best tuning pegs I've ever played, except the fact that they're plastic. But the way you actually restring them is so easy compared to like Gibson, any other Fender. It's incredible. It takes you 2 seconds to change strings.
A guitar
Yeah.
tech's dream. For sure.
I love the plastic tips. I love them.
Ha
I do. I think it looks so cool.
I think it's a modern thing. It's like a modernizing thing. I think like a what is the material made on? Like in the Black One tuners, the
Perloy.
Perloid. Yeah, I think that's just a not like a old school thing. And I think this is just it's newer. It's different. You know,
Well, I like it.
I don't
It's
think
not shiny. I hate on Fenders. I like that relic hardware because it's not shiny. And if this were just a big shiny tuner, I don't think it would look good.
Yeah, I was just looking at my Strat. It has variations of the vintage style. It has Godo vintage style tuners because they're locking. But yeah, you get it pretty silvery, pretty shiny. Then after a while, it dies down and gets pretty like maybe matte almost finish.
Mhm.
But I don't think it would have fit the personality of the modern aesthetic.
No,
No,
and if
definitely not.
if
Just
PRS didn't tell you, sorry, Ryan.
Oh, I was gonna throw the modern aesthetic thing. It's like aging a Silver Sky. I know there have been some people that have done it. It just really doesn't make sense. Like you don't see a Tesla driving around with patina like an old school hot rod. It
Yeah,
just doesn't work. Doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. They don't rust. They're
Yeah.
aluminum. Buy one. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Well, it's like I think too the whole plastic thing. Okay, yeah, is it the best material? No, but if PRS didn't come out and flat out say that it's plastic, they're like, oh, it's some like blend of material that gives it this matte and textured feel to it. No one would have cared. Everyone would have been like, okay, cool. But
Is
the
it-
fact that they came out and said plastic, it's like,
The whole thing is plastic. It's not metal wrapped in plastic. Really?
as far as I know, it's all just plastic.
Okay.
I don't really know.
Maybe
They could have
it
said
is
like
wrapped, but
hybrid polymer technology.
yeah, exactly. They could have said some BS marketing to make it seem like
You know,
it's not, but they kind of said, oh yeah, they're plastic. And they're like, we don't care.
yeah.
Again, if it's good enough for John
Space
and like
age.
someone like Brad Whitford, it's good enough for you walking into Guitar Center and buying
Yeah.
one and playing in your basement. It's good enough for you.
I cannot count how many Les Pauls I picked up at Chicago Music Exchange or my old J160E that I've had to tighten the tuners. And I've never touched a Silver Sky. I never held a Silver Sky that has had any loose tuning issues or anything like that. But my Les Paul behind me, it happens. It's just an old design. And
My Mara Sig's got that issue going on right now too.
Yeah, I hope I don't get sued for this, but I haven't ever picked up a Gibson and said I like this guitar.
I have a Les Paul for you.
It's like
We'll
it's
come
okay.
back to that.
He didn't mean that. He didn't mean that. We'll come back to that. So molded jack plate as well, which was kind of a unique selling point. Just the way it's raised up, and you're not kind of having to fight with it as much. Downside to that jack is that certain like jack styles won't work. Like the Boss Wazelcraft headphones, you need an adapter, like a secondhand or like third-party adapter to make that actually work with your Silver Sky. But I imagine that'd be a little bit frustrating. You go out and spend money on these Wazelcraft headphones, and then you gotta go in and change out for the Silver Sky. Buy an adapter, but it's a cool touch. Just one of the many modern features, and 4 trim springs on the back. Much like the JM Sig, no plate cover on the back either. Just the way John prefers it and the way he likes it.
Yeah,
There was some changes.
I took off my back plate. On my like first Strat, I said, "Oh, Jimmy plays with his teeth. He holds it up. There's no plate. That's the way to do it."
Yep,
That's
that's me too. Yeah, I took them every single Strat I have. First thing I do, pop that back plate off.
Well, on John 64, the backlit is still on.
Is it okay?
Yeah, there's some times when you see him picking it up and you see the back plate still on there. And then people like Eric Johnson. I mean,
That's where the
depends where
dummy coil must be.
what's that?
I
What do you
said
say, Ahmad?
that's where the dummy coil is. That's why he has a cover like that.
The other thing that I tried was very Eric Johnson. He likes, I think, to have 3 spring and then 1 empty space and 1 spring to 4 springs. I tried doing that, but I couldn't take the springs off. Apparently makes a difference to strats. That's very deep into Eric Johnson bubble.
All right, so in 2019, there was a couple of changes that we also need to talk about here. The fretboard shape got changed from the maple and the rosewood with the release. It was announced in late 2019 that they were going to be adding a different shaped rosewood fretboard, mainly with the shoulders. They're making them a bit more round. Again, this is one of those things where I don't know about you guys, but if I played a 2018, 2019 Silver Sky versus a 2020 on, both rosewood, that I'd be able to really tell that much of a difference. That said, though, when I owned the Nebula Silver Sky, that was the most comfortable out of all the Silver Skies I'd played, and I've played a few. That one was the most comfortable neck for me to play. Where the regards, that was just something to do with that specific guitar I bonded with, or me actually feeling a difference with the rounded shoulders. I don't know.
It's interesting.
And then I guess as
At the A-beard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think if you were to do this, you wouldn't do it properly. You'd have to do a blindfold test because if not, you know automatically. Maybe with the color that which is which, but like if I were to go now to Sam Ash and play one, I mean maybe I'll still think this is a cool guitar, but I don't think I'd really feel whoa, it is different. But if you brought it back into the blindfold test, maybe you would notice a little slight change to the neck. Sorry.
But even like look at the mounts, like the thickness at, you know, the first and second fret. You're talking about the difference of 55 64ths to 27
30 seconds.
32. Yeah, 30 seconds. It's such a minute difference, but they changed it for a reason. Maybe to make it a bit more comfortable. I know the only other thing that really changed in terms of specifications for the Silver Sky is the finish. They also announced in late fall of 2019 that they were swapping everything over from a poly finish to a nitro over cellulose finish. And for those who don't really know what that is, that means that, yes, it's a nitro finish, but there's a layer of poly underneath. And that's something that PRS doesn't really, again, they don't really spell that out for you, but there's a video of someone refinishing a Silver Sky, and he strips the paint on it, and there's a poly one, and you can tell it's very, very thin to begin with, but I think it just makes the guitar a little bit more resonant. It is going to age a lot more quicker than the poly finish, but we haven't seen, besides the flip-flop finishes, any Silver Skies that are aging and wearing more aggressively because of this switchover. Those are kind of two cool things that happened right before Winter NAMM 2020 that were announced. Oh, I guess as well, Horizon and Onyx both got discontinued also.
Yeah.
So only a 2-year run for both of those colors. In terms of specs, guys, floor is open. Anything else we want to touch on?
If it feels good, it is good.
Can't argue with that.
Just,
I think what I heard on the maple was that they were cutting the necks the same shape, and then I think the rosewood was thicker, so they rounded the shoulders differently to accommodate. But then someone else is saying the maple is 2-piece anyway, so who knows why they made that change? I don't have a good reason.
Ahmad, I know we talked a bit about the headstock shape and everything like that as well. I know you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, so just to nerd out a bit, if you felt a good strat, to me, what a good strat is, I agree with John. It's feeling slinky when you play it. It feels buttery. That's really the only way I can describe it. And that was a main goal of him, to make these guitars feel buttery. So there's some magic combination when you're talking Strat guitars. You've got the fact that the thing is decked, you're talking the number of springs, you're talking the scale length, and I've even nerded out before looking at the depth of the holes that are drilled into the tremolo. So I checked it on the Silver Sky. They're drilled really, really deep. So if you think about the length of the string from the ball end to the headstock, well, it's shorter. So then, okay, that could be the reason for less tension. A plain sawn neck rather than a quarter sawn, less tension. Maybe the break angle because they have that scarf joint. So there's some formula consistently. I've played about 10 Silver Skies. They all have less string tension. When you play a good Fender, it feels like that. But it's maybe 1 out of every 5 Fenders, whereas with the Silver Sky, all of them have less string tension. So that was important to John, and I think that's important to hit on. They did a good job on that. They're fairly consistent. They're more consistent than Fender is. But I did play one dog we got from Sweetwater. My brother did, and he sent it back. It was not up to the level of the other ones. But as a general rule, they're pretty darn consistent. On the headstock, they did experiment with different shapes, and they did try the 6 in line. There's a picture online of that, and you can link to that. And they ultimately designed on the one that's flipped. So funny story about that. When I was talking to John about it, he was when I told him, I said, I'm thinking about buying a Moxan Silver Sky, but the headstock's throwing me off. I'm not used to it yet. And he said this was actually pretty cool. They apparently did model the neck off of his 64, and he would get the prototypes from Paul, and he just kept saying, no, it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel the same. And Paul's sitting there saying, well, it's the same specs. We measured your neck. It's the same spec. And he said, so we just blindfolded and I played it, and then it feels the same. He said, there's something that happens when you look at 3 tuners on a side versus 6 in line, and it was throwing him off. He kept swearing it wasn't the same profile when in fact it was. And he told me, he said, the neck, it's the same neck. It's the same neck as what I've got on mine. So I thought that was pretty cool. And it, if you think about it, you never think about the biases that we've got when we play. And you hand, if I hand you a guitar and I say, hey, this is a master built Strat, you're probably going to be more prone to liking it than if I tell you, hey, this is a dog. It's that kind of idea.
Totally. I think we can all agree though that this is a cooler coffee table than the PRS Headstock Shape. I think we'd all like to have the Fender coffee table in our living rooms.
I like the guys on that pedal show. Dan and Mick got one.
Oh, awesome!
They're
hard to find, man.
They're like, the Silver Sky headstock has grown on me. Now it takes a while. I mean, you're disrupting a 50, 60 some year old design. It's going to take a while. Now it looks normal to me, which is crazy. When I first saw it, I'm thinking, oh, this is weird.
No, I think that's so true. Is that now that we're used to it, it doesn't seem out of the normal. It took a little while, but now it looks great. Anything else on the spec of the guitar, guys, before we move on to some more history?
I think worth mentioning is the action and playability. I think I've seen a lot of posts in the owners group where people are saying, oh, is the action too low? Is the action too high? Blah, 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 blah. Curious to hear your guys' experience with yours. Mine was kind of great out of the box. It's kind of medium, not too low, no buzzing or anything like that. But I played lower action guitars, but I think it's a personal preference. And the older I get and the more I play, I kind of care less about low action. I just kind of want to play more.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ryan. I think mine came. I don't know how to use gauges and everything. It just, as long as it doesn't buzz, it's good to go now. And as long as it's how do you say it? It's consistent on each string, so it actually makes sense how it's level set. Makes sense. The action I think plays great. The speaking of, we talk about string tension. I think this guitar shines, in my opinion, with 10.5s, Ernie Ball, or just 10.5 gauge strings. That also depends on how often do you play as a player, because if you play every single day, 10s they may seem too easy after a couple days. I think 10.5 on this is the perfect the perfect string gauge that you play a lot. It still feels a little not too heavy. I know Justin and I on our other guitars, on our Gibson guitars, like 11 to 52, that's a totally different story. But I think 10.5 to I think like 48, I think is the string string gauge. I think it works perfect. And at that point, it's up to you on how often do you play. Not 10s or go crazy and go to 9s. And don't do that.
Yeah.
I like 10.5 from the Silver Sky personally.
And John uses 10.5 to 48 as well, the Ernie Ball Mega.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think also
you feel.
Yeah, you can feel it. I think also depends on what guitars do you have in your collection. If you have multiple guitars, and just trying to find a balance between all of them. So if you have 10.5s on your Silver Sky, you can have 11s on your Gibson or whatever, and the tension will feel pretty similar. Whereas if you go have 11s on your Gibsons and 10s on your Silver Sky or Strat, it may feel like you're going a little looser, maybe. But
Yeah, I have 10s. I have 10s on my Les Paul and my Silver Sky, and when I play the same little riff on my Les Paul, it's like, oh, well, overshot that bend a little bit. I gotta bring it down a little bit, for sure.
Yeah.
Ahmad's like, what's this Gibson talk?
I think that speaks to that buttery feel. And he talked about that when he was at Crossroads. When he hits the strings, he wants them to come back a certain way, which is why probably, Gabe, you can go 10.5 and they probably feel like a 10 on most Strats do. And that's part of what when I'm buying a Strat is I want it to feel that way. And if it feels stiff, you can't pay me to own an Eric Johnson Strat. Those are notoriously stiff feeling. And I like that buttery feel. And I rock 10s on all my Strat guitars. I don't play as often as you do, Gabe.
Yeah, I mean, I follow this Instagram trend. I got Kurt Mangan's 10s. They're great strings, but some of the Ernie Ball 10.5s just on the guitar just feels right. Which that would be cool if they shipped with 10.5s like John uses. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. Worth mentioning, they're set up for 10s from the factory.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And PRS strings are made by D'Addario.
And I think it's also, I don't know, it's personal preference. Like, I think, was it B.B. King that told Billy Gibbons he was working too hard playing 10s or whatever? Hendrix played 6s, roto sounds. Like, it's personal preference. Just make sure your guitar's set up for it. You know, don't run 6s on a nut that's cut for 10s or whatever, because the action's going to be weird. It's going to play like shit. And it comes down to that. Bleep my comment.
No, I totally agree. And I think you guys all hit the nail on the head. The Silver Sky from the factory, even though it comes with 10s, the action and everything's really set up good. My personal experience, I also played a dog Silver Sky, so to speak. It was really weird. I walked into a Guitar Works here I'm in Canada. I don't think you guys have Guitar Works down in the States, but this guy was like, oh man, yeah, we got the Silver Sky in, and this is the best one. He's like, man, you're gonna walk out here wanting to buy it. And I looked at him and I said, well, I got a Nebula on the way, so I highly doubt that. And he was kind of like, oh. But he was hyping up this guitar, the Silver Sky. He was like, yeah, we got so many in, and this one's the best. I picked it up, and it was the worst one I'd played. I don't know what about it was, but it just wasn't resonant. It didn't feel good in my hands. And maybe it was just the salesman as well, constantly opening up the room, being like, oh, what do you think? What do you think? Every 2 seconds, like, let me try this out. But definitely going off playing down when I was at Tone City in Santa Monica. I played an Orion Green one. That was, I think, still arguably the best one I'd ever played besides my Nebula. But going off of playing an amazing one to a kind of a dog, then back, it's kind of like a weird experience. But I'd say like 99% of them are great. It's just once you get to play a few of them, like getting to play a few of them, you do kind of notice that, you know, they can't make every single one out of the factory perfect. But yeah, I agree too. I wish they could.
For your Nebula, did it come to you straight from PRS?
No, so the Nebula came to Wildcat Guitars. Shout out to those guys there. Went to them. They just checked it out to make sure that it was good. They offered me a free setup, and I said, nope, I just want it right from the factory. I want to give it a run right from there.
I was going to ask that.
The last thing, we haven't talked about it. I'm not sure if we're going to talk about it now, but